Samson falls in love with her, but it doesn't appear to be reciprocated in verse 4. Nowhere in the story does it say that she loves him. It said he loves her. And as it was read, she said, if you love me. So here we are using this terminology to use her abilities to get the information she requires. If you love me, you would do this for me. If you love me, you would do that. So it's this very conditional type of love. It's not a God-given love in per se. It's this conditional earthly love. So I looked up that word love in verse 4, and from the Strong's Concordance, it's number 157. In the Hebrew, it means A-H-A-B. We know it as Ahab, but it's pronounced Orhab, and it means to have affection, sexually or otherwise, love, like, or friend. So it's an affection. So he had a deep affection for her. Is it the same as we think, that when we read that he loved her, that it was that all-encompassing love where you're married to this person, you would do anything for this person? Or was it really an affection? And did he visit her because she plies him for an answer day after day after day? This didn't all happen in one day. This happened over a period of time. For many days, it says. She is swayed by the Philistines to find the source of Samson's strength in verse 5. And the Philistines are the enemies of the Israelites. They have taken away their weapons. They have made them virtually slave-like to them. And they have harassed and tormented and not been very kind at all. And this is the process of an enemy. So, is she a concubine or a courtesan? Because she is approached by the Philistine lords. Could she have been a courtesan? Could she have been a concubine? Did she live in her own home? It appears so, that she lives in her own home. Is she a courtesan? We don't know. Is she a concubine? Well, it doesn't say. So there's a lot that it doesn't say, but it is probable that she could have been any one of them. In verse 18, it says, she went and called for the Philistine lords. She went and called for them. So she had this relationship. She's a formidable feminine weapon. And this is not an offensive thing to say. This is what she was used for. This lady was used by the Philistines, and she used for to get Samson because they wanted to afflict him. She used the Philistines for money. Didn't she have any money? Was she poor? So it says a lot about, was she married? Now, with the woman of Timnah, there was a wedding banquet. There was a feast. But in no way in this story do we ever hear of Samson holding a feast or going to a feast and a wedding ceremony for Delilah. Any comments? Yes, Jennifer.
I don't think they were married, and I think that he was just besotted and, just completely led by lust, really. And how could he be so stupid to, 3 times she conned, he knew that what she was going to do, he was attacked by the Philistines 3 times, and he still went and told her. I don't know what he was thinking. Really.
It does really tend to lean towards that way, doesn't it? That he he looks like he's coming across as in a word, dumb, doesn't it? He's a dumb man. But really, or does he have so much faith in his ability that he just dismisses her? What do you think, Norma?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Well, to put it nicely, I think he was completely naive to day after day he must surely have known what she was up to. And it says that there were men in the room who pounced on him. Now, if that happened to a man like Samson once, surely he would never allow it to happen a second time. I don't think he was stupid. I don't think God would have used him if he'd been stupid. So he was either infatuated with her, or maybe he was trying to show off. It's hard to understand, isn't it? But
it is.
And I don't think she could have had feelings for him to have treated him like that, knowing what was coming up.
Well, let me ask this question. Would a wife treat her husband that way? Emily says, reminds me of the continued parallel in Bible between faithful and adulterous women. Yes, it does, because they liken her to Jael, who killed Sisera. But that was for the benefit of Israel as well. And it doesn't look like that for her that this was the benefit for Israel, in that she was the one that was being benefited here, not Samson. But in the end, God uses her because she thinks she's just doing this for herself. But she doesn't realize behind all of this, who prevails here. But it's also, we're going to get into the negative aspect of her. Anybody else got a comment on this?
Just like going on from like that parallel between the like adulterous woman and the faithful woman. Also, like she's quite, in her character, like manipulative and deceptive. Like, and it talks about like throughout Proverbs and like the prophets as well, like Israel's like been deceived and they've gone off with harlots and they're been like deceived by like a false truth or like a lie. And like I think that's kind of what she's doing to Samson, is that she's using like her charm to like manipulate and deceive him into believing a lie.
That's a great pickup. And yes, you are. That's a leaning, because that's where we're going, because now we're going to go to the negative aspect, because that's how she really is portrayed. And she is actually considered a formidable feminine weapon. She is the heartless wrecker of a mighty man. It really got quite. She is a treacherous woman. And that actually came from both women and men, that she was treacherous, because if she was an Israelite, okay, thanks, Jennifer. If she was an Israelite and she was his wife, surely she would have treated him a little bit differently. She would not have betrayed him. And if she did betray him, she would have had to been enticed. Because if we look at all the other ladies, they treated their husbands a little bit differently. I was thinking of Lot's wife. Now, she was actually a mean lady and she had this disregard. But as Norma said, it was infatuation. As the Strongs brought out, it was an affection or a deep affection that he had for her, rather than this all-encompassing love in a marriage type setting. And it appears that Samson didn't upkeep this lady at all. She wasn't put into a house that he provided for her. She seems to have done that for herself. And of course, if she was a courtesan, and that she would have been put into a house somewhere off the palace that type of thing. And usually a concubine lived with the husband, not the other way around. It seems that, is she a Philistine? It is plausible to actually say, yes, she's most likely definitely a Gentile and probably a Philistine as well.
In that culture as well, like in marriage, the husband would have had like total control and authority over his wife. Like they often would refer to them as like my lord. And so it would seem like for that culture, like very, like, could she have got away with doing that? Like, wouldn't the husband's husband's like word was law kind of thing?
It is, but the other thing is we've also had women whose husbands spoke to them and actually took their advice. We've also had women as well. There is a perception that the husband is lording it over the woman, but we know that the woman still had to consent to the marriage. So the husband, she could decline. So in a way, she could actually have had a relatable a relationship in that she could be both able to speak to her husband, able to be considered, had her understanding, because his mother, Samson's mother and father, both spoke to each other. Both, if you read the story, they were actually husband and wife. They actually spoke to one another. The angel came to visit, and his wife goes and tells Manoah what's happened. We don't hear anything like that in this relationship at all. So we do have this lady using her feminine wiles to manipulate Samson, as you said, Emily, to get the information for others. So if Samson could have controlled himself, then Delilah would have had no power over him. She said, if you love me, therefore that gives her power, gives her strength. She had been having this relationship with Samson, and when he became a threat to the Philistines, she was approached by the Philistine lords. Before that, she doesn't render a mention. So this was an ongoing relationship which was already active, and then when the Philistines couldn't get Samson directly, they used an indirect method and this woman. So it's always, so I've looked at, is she married? So we've touched on it, and we're going to have a look at it strongly. So according to Who's Who of the Bible, and I forgot to look up SV, it's one of the contributors, Samson having already shown his propensity for fickleness, fell foul of her snare, and they were married. So from a male perspective, and even rabbinical perspective, the rabbis believe she was married. So her intrigue leads to Samson's bondage, blindness, and death. The rabbis view this story in a negative light, and their commentary is that Samson married Delilah. When he allowed his spiritual state to become diminished, did God permit him to lose his strength and become publicly humiliated captive? Because it's really, when it says the Lord, in verse 20, the Lord departed from him. So it looks like that the power that prevails here. You will see that it is God in control of all of this. But when you're in the story, it seems that you're in control. Is Delilah in control, or is Samson in control? Samson believes he is in control. No matter what she does to him, he's taunting her, he's tormenting her. He says, tie me up, weave my hair, and he's lying to her, and he's going to wake up. She goes, behold, the Philistines, because they're just in the room, aren't they? And he wakes up and everything's broken. So he just believes in the power of his ability of his hair. Now, the hair is a sign of his Nazirite status. And it
Michelle,
says,
excuse me.
yes,
Michelle, I'm sorry. When you said that Delilah, that she was married, you didn't mean that she was married to Samson? You mean
Well,
she was?
yes, according
Oh.
to the men, the rabbis, according to the rabbis, they believe she was married. Not only do they believe she was married, that she was Jewish. And I went,
Oh.
okay. So according to Nissa Mindell from Shabbat.org, Samson married again a Philistine woman called Delilah, and she became a Jewess.
Oh, she converted.
Yes. And so she converted. And I just go, right. So they believe she is married, that he actually had 2 wives. And I just looked at it and I went, okay, you make up your own mind. What do you reckon, Pam?
Okay, I'm just quietly listening, and that makes sense. If the Jewish people think that Samson had 2 wives, well, to me, this is the whole over picture of what's happening, because it's at the wheat harvest that he comes back. He's at Pentecost, so that he comes back and finds his first wife's father had given away his wife. So that wife didn't want to become the bride, and so if the second Delilah wants to become the bride, if the Jewish people think that she converted, well, she hasn't held her conversion. It was a false conversion, and so she's tricked Samson because her heart was never in the conversion. So she's not going to be the bride. So for my concept, it's she's the harlot bride. And so she's not coming into the faith. And so this Pentecost, the brides, the harvest and stuff, it's all one big picture.
Thank you. That's it does tend to lean you. This is actually a prophet's portion. So I'm trying not to go into the prophetic, but you've touched on it today. And yes, it does do that. It's you've actually touched on the prophet's perspective today, and with the whole Israelites, because he is the deliverer. He was born to be the deliverer of the Israelite people from the Philistines. And so Delilah becomes the catalyst for the Lord's purpose to come about, to free the Israelite people, because they have been basically emasculated and emancipated because they've been de-weaponized, haven't they? And so he looks for an alternative. So, and she is the person that has been found. Delilah could not resist the offer of wealth, and they call her a heartless, I'm going to use the word person, because she agrees to sell her husband's life for 1,100 pieces of silver, and not just 1,100 pieces of silver from each lord that came to her. So it was quite a large sum of money she sells her husband's information for. And so so where does the prostitute come in? So Pam has led us into that. And yes, it comes from, if you can purchase sexual favors from a prostitute, therefore what's the difference? Is this a bribe? And the Jewish people render it a bribe rather than paying for sexual favors. So is she an actual prostitute? It does not say, but as Pam said, she represents the people, Israelite people, or the bride, as a prostitute or a harlot bride. So the scriptures do not say how many lords turned up. It's worth, the 1,100 pieces of silver is worth 100 days of wages, 100 days for the secret of his strength. A large sum of money. And this was an agreement or a contract between her and the Philistine lords.
Michelle, excuse me. What do you mean when you said that she was a catalyst to free the Israelites? What do you mean?
She was used as an agent So an agent, a
But-
go-between.
No, I know what the words mean, but I don't know what you mean by how was she an agent to do that?
So because she's this go-between, and they use someone else. It's like when you buy a house, you get an agent to help you buy a house. But
But the Israelites weren't not free, were they? Are you saying that they weren't free at this time?
they were free, but they were still being. The Philistines still came and had power over them, and so what God did was they couldn't do it directly, so they used her, and it's said she's an agent, or she is the one being used here to actually afflict Samson, because he was the one that was coming against them. And so she is, for me, a catalyst in that she joins Samson with the Philistines. So she's they've used an intermediary. It might be my understanding of the scriptures, but I see her as important because without her, the Philistines would not have defeated Samson. Their whole aim was to defeat Samson because he was the one standing in their way. And
But how does that free the Israelites? I still don't get it. Because Samson was an Israelite,
yes,
yeah, okay.
So,
and
my understanding
I'm confused by
sorry.
What you've I understand the words. I understand what a catalyst and the intermediary. I understand. I just don't get what you're talking about. You say that. That's all.
Yes.
Sorry. Someone else.
Yes.
Sorry.
By her giving him over to the Philistines, the Philistines still have control over the Israelites at this, because I'm trying not to go to the prophetic, and he still has control. He is in 40 years. He is a judge in those 40 years. But he rules and reigns. He's the last judge, as far as the next judge is a priest judge. He's the last true judge like that, and he's ruling, and he's coming against the Philistines as a single person, but they still are afflicting, wanting to afflict the Israelites, and so he is standing in their way to afflict the Israelites fully. To do that.
Well, yes. So I don't. Yeah, I get that. That's why I'm confused by how it's for a freeing of the Israelites. I would think that it's actually putting them under further kind of subjugation.
Yes, but when we get to the end, when he gets captured, she is used to get him to be captured. And so they want the power, so they want the strength in the end. And he gets, so let me stop.
He pulls it all down over them and over the Philistines. And
yes. So we haven't got to the end yet. We're still in the middle of the story.
Right. So that's the freedom part.
Yeah.
At the
You're
end.
at the end.
Oh, I know. Well, had you not mentioned that, I wouldn't have. I was just
sorry, but that's a
point.
good thing, because you're at the end, and that's where we want to get to. But she ends up being the catalyst. In other words, he gets captured, his eyes get taken out, he gets put between the two pillars. So we see this whole strength and the power and who's going to prevail here. She thinks at this time she's prevailing. He thinks he's prevailing. But actually God says there's a time for everything. As we see in Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything under the sun. And so what happens is he gets between the two pillars and he pulls them down, and he kills more Philistines then. And they actually do become free after that. So we're just at the payment section. So we've just jumped to the end because it is getting time.
Sorry.
But it is an actual. So Delilah accepts a bribe to reveal the source of Samson's strength to the Philistines. And each of the Philistine rulers, they think it's probably 5 of them, because that's represent the 5 important Philistine cities. And they pay her this money. And so she does not actually love him. It's not reciprocated. And she has no qualms in actually taking the money. She has no hesitation in handing him over and betraying him. he, of course, believes everything is in his hair. The strength is in his hair. She actually finally finds out that that he's a Nazirite. Now, here is another woman who betrays him, but this time for money. This plan to entrap or snare him was quite premeditated. And she had the men waiting for the outcome of the information concealed within her room. She was, in a way, that's why I said she was savvy and she was able, because who actually has men waiting in the room to pounce on a person? And we see that in Judges 16:5, where it says, entice him. In other words, use your female wiles. And then in Judges 16:15, it says, that whole saying of how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? So if they were married, the hearts would have been joined together. But here we have actually two individual people, two separate people. And she is saying your heart is not with me because you've mocked me. And this is his nature, to do that, to mock her. And so Delilah lulls Samson into a false sense of security before she tests what he says is true. So he gets to the point where she has vexed him unto death, he says, and that means to annoy, to frustrate, to irritate day after day. In Judges 16, she's brought this vexation upon him. I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit, according to Ecclesiastes 1 verses 14. And then she'd say in Judges 16, she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as I have done time after time and shake myself free. For he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Once he confessed the truth, it's not until he divulges that he is a Nazirite and speaks the truth, as in verse 17, that his strength leaves. Because his true strength comes from the Lord, Delilah did not know that he was a Nazirite and therefore was more likely to be a Philistine woman. Did she negate his Nazirite status? Well, the whole thing is, she didn't, in that God put him in a position because of his weaknesses. God used those weaknesses to put him in a position under this woman to actually end the vow. It's a big statement, isn't it, to say that? The rabbis describe Delilah as robbing Samson of his masculinity, strength, intellect, and religion, and also explore how she robbed him of his intended path in life, that of a Nazirite. But did she? That's the question. Did she? Or did she only contribute to it? Did he actually was walking along that path already? And she was a contributing factor. Do you agree with that statement? He too thought his strength and power came from not cutting his hair, a sign that he was a Nazirite. But actually his strength and power came from the Holy Spirit that would come upon him at the needed time. According to Ramban or Maimonides, he says Samson's strength was a divine gift from God so that he could help the Jewish people, but such divine assistance was contingent on his total devotion that was symbolized by his acceptance of the restrictions of the Nazarite. Thus, when his piety began to wane and he let himself be attracted by the beauty of the Philistine women, God's assistance gradually deserted him, and this process was climaxed by the removal of his hair. He was now in that position. So she was a woman of persistence and deception who had personal charm, mental ability, self-command and nerves, but who used all her qualities for one purpose. It was said for money. Her allegiance appears to be that of the Philistine and not towards Samson. Any questions? This truly is a woman who could have used all of herself for the Lord. And in a way, God used her in a way for his purpose because of her attributes. And her attributes are actually good ones. She is savvy. She is able. she is confident. She is switched on, and she is in command of herself. These are all good attributes. These are wonderful, wonderful things to have. It's the way you use your abilities and for what purpose that puts you in a good light or a negative light, isn't it? It's how you want to be and how you want to see yourself. And do you go about life tricking people, taunting people, tormenting people to get your own way and using that sort of strength? Or do you have the strength of the Lord residing within you, and that outworks itself, and therefore you become helpful? The fruit of the Spirit is love, peace, joy, peace, goodness, kindness, long-suffering, patience, self-control, and gentleness. Was she any of these things? And I'm going to leave you with that. Any further comments? It is 11 o'clock and we've run out of time. I hope you've enjoyed Delilah. Go back and have a look at her and have a look at and fresh eyes and ask yourself questions. We'll see you all again next week. Don't forget to join us on the TorahPortion.org for this Saturday with Pastor Greg Cummings, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Bye.